welcome. My name is Penelope Chatterton. Welcome to Awaken the Dream. My friends, I have a friend that I haven't seen in a long time who early on with Awaken the Dream was my guest. His name is Reverend John Sullivan. He is the minister of Healing Hands of Light in Chicopee. And today we're going to find out what spiritualism is, how John got into it, and I love stories like this because John is very real. He has a wonderful personality. He's a great minister and a terrific medium. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now with all of that, you don't have to go down to grade school.
No, we won't go
But I want to
that
know
far.
how in the world you got involved with spirit and phenomena and all of that.
Well, about many years ago, it was probably around 1970,
Oh.
I purchased a house in East Bridgewater, Mass.
Okay.
And it was an antique cape. I'm an antique restorer, both of houses and furniture, and consequently, it was in my ballpark. So this was a great deal. The woman had committed suicide in the swimming pool.
Oh, dear.
She had tied barbells and blocks around her neck, jumped in, they found her a couple of weeks later.
Oh, dear.
So when I was able to get involved with this house, I just thought, great, this is a great deal. So we bought the place and moved in, and we're not aware, especially since I had a Catholic background, that we had ghosts
Oh, geez.
or poltergeists, whatever you want to call them.
Oh.
So at first we figured the house is settling. That's what all the noises are. But distinctly, we'd be sitting at the kitchen table, and even with friends around, and they would say, "Who's pacing upstairs?" And there were only two of us in the house, and plus my daughter, who wasn't there most of the time. She'd be in school or off. And consequently, we realized it's not the house settling anymore. There's something going on here.
Yeah.
So we went in from that aspect to what could be happening. So finally you realize we think we have a ghost. And my daughter started waking up. She was about 13, 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And at night, and she'd scream, bloody murder, and run into her bedroom, and she'd say, Dad, look at her. And there was nobody that I could see.
Oh, gosh.
So I said, bad dream. So we thought maybe what we need to do is get some pictures, because she's describing this woman.
Your daughter's describing.
My daughter
Okay.
is describing this woman. So I got 5 pictures. One was of this woman, and 4 others that were just people. Same age group, same everything.
Okay.
If you're going to do an investigation, do it properly. So I took the
Get 'em all
cards.
in the room.
Right. I put hers right in the middle. I showed the first one. She said, nope. When I got to the 3rd card, I mean, her eyes went wide and her mouth dropped. And we knew at this point in time, this was the lady who had died in this house. So we realized we had something beyond the norm.
You had company.
We had company. And anybody who came in and sat down with us would do the same thing. They'd say, who's pacing upstairs?
Yeah.
And there was nobody there.
And she's not on the mortgage.
No, she's not on the mortgage. She's not paying the rent. So one thing led to another, and I decided I'd pay the local priest a visit. And so I went up to talk to the local priest at the time, and I said to him, Father, I have this. And he looked at me. No, I'm in my, probably 30 at that time. And he said, son, when we do drugs and alcohol, we have these flashbacks. And I said, I hate to be the one to tell you, but I don't do drugs. I drink very little. So therefore, I'm not having a flashback.
Yeah.
And he said, pray. And I said, well, that's not solving my problem. So there was a minister in town who was quite different. And he had parked a rail car, a sleeper, on the side of the Congregational Church for people who were the kids in the summertime who were transients to sleep in. A little hostel, and I figured, well, I said, he's caused enough stir in town. Maybe he's into this. So I went to see him. And we chatted for a moment, and he said, I have the same problem. He said, must have been those drugs and alcohol we had when we were younger. And I said, this is not making sense.
Yeah.
It's not making sense. One of the things that you come to find out is once you have a problem, if you send out the thought, it gets answered.
All right.
Either by someone here or someone from the other side. So it happened, I kept saying, you know, I need to solve this problem. How do I solve this problem? So next thing I know, I get a call from a gentleman who ran a bookstore in Bridgewater. And he said, I understand you do cabinet work. And I said, yes. He said, I'd like to build some bookshelves for my store. Sure. Well, I went over and talked to him, and I was always very interested in Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. I love his stories. And we were over there, and I'd say to him, you know, Dave, I said, if you come across anything more of Arthur Conan Doyle, he said, save it for me. I'd like to buy the books. So I ended up with a lot of the other books, Round the Red Lamp, Micah Clark, and a few of his other, The White Company, a few of his other stories. Finally, one day he said to me, hey, I got one here. It's the history of spiritualism.
Oh, go on.
So I said, I'll take it. So I took the book and went, and I must say, I never completed reading it. It was so dry that one of the few books in history that I've never read.
It was boring.
Oh, it was very boring. Nothing like a Sherlock Holmes, I assure you. So one thing led to another, and I decided, I think I need to find out a little bit about this. So how best to do it than go to a service?
Sure.
Well, the first service I had gone to was an onset.
Yes, sure.
And what was interesting about onset was they had a jamboree or a 10, 15, 20-year some
they have
type
a fair, don't they?
Well,
sort of?
something like a fair. This was the old group at the time.
Okay.
Custances. Both of them were ordained ministers and ran the church. So I went down and had a little chat with them, I thought, but that day happened to have that little jamboree or whatever, and they had a service at the high school. And I must say, after the service, I was not very well impressed with what they had to offer.
Okay.
The mediums seemed to be okay, but again, we can't judge a medium unless we're getting the information direct. We can't judge what you're getting, okay? Is it good or is it bad? Who knows?
Yeah, good,
okay?
Good analysis.
So I decided I would go around and look for another church, and lo and behold, in Brockton, there was another church.
A spiritualist church.
Spiritualist church.
Okay.
First Spiritualist Church of Brockton. So I went over, and there was a lady, Gertrude Stevens was the pastor. And I started attending some of the services, very good. And one day she said to me, John, would you be so kind as to take the place of one of the healers that's missing? Well, I had never
you had never done it?
laying on of hands. And what was really interesting was I felt, coming from a medical family, Mom was an anesthesiologist, Dad was an eye doctor, that, you know, everything was a pill.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another. We got together and I went up and did laying on of hands. And one of the ladies who I worked with was her daughter, whom I did not know. And her daughter was probably mid-50s at the time. And after the healing, she came over to me and she said, what did you do? And I said, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue. And she said, well, why I ask is I'm a waitress. And carrying the trays, I'm going to give it up because my back is killing me. And she said, I don't have any pain now. That part intrigued me because I'm trying to figure out, how did this all work?
What did I do?
Okay, what did I do? How did it come about? So I persisted in following this through, and I took the place of the healer, got more involved in the church as far as chairing the services. And
Did you take classes?
I did take classes. I took classes in onset with the Custances, and I took classes on Friday night in Brockton with her.
All right.
So one thing led to another over a period of time. We decided in Brockton to sit around this oak table. The oak table was 4.5 or good 4 foot wide by 8 foot long, heavy, with 6 bulbous oak legs. Took 4 people to lift the table. So we're sitting there one night, and our hands are just like this on the table, and you could see the light coming in through the shades, even though the shades were drawn. I mean, the street lamps were there, and you could see everything clearly. and all of a sudden, the table started to rock.
Oh, geez.
And the Reverend said to me, was talking about that we have spirit here, and I said, oh, yeah, I can feel this. But again, we're not grabbing the table. We have our hands on top like this. Not even flat, just the fingers touching.
And you could feel that move.
Oh, this thing is starting to rock and roll. And so one thing led to another, and I'm down the other end of the table from her, and she said, John, I have your father here. And all of a sudden she stopped, and she says, no, I can't have your father here. Your father's alive. Oh. And I said, never mind what you think. Just give it the way it is. And she said, I have a man here who says he's your father. He tells me he worked for the railroad. He tells me he's been in spirit for some time. Do you know who this guy is? And I said, I absolutely do. I've never seen my actual father. But he worked for the Penn Central Railroad as a conductor. And that's where my mother had met him initially. And by this point, he was in the spirit side of life. So it was very interesting to having someone who knew my stepdad and had gone to him for her eyes, and yet here she's describing a father. So you have to sit back and say, okay,
I'm being moved.
What's going on here? By this point, I had moved to the Cape. And so I would go up on Friday night to Brockton, and on, I think it was Wednesday night, I went to the Onset Church for the class, and got involved in the Onset Church with different things from billet readings, which is nothing more than putting your name on a paper and somebody gives it to you, and you don't know who this is, and you're trying to hope spirit comes in. I don't find that to be the most conducive way to do readings, but everybody has their own method, so to speak.
Sure.
So this was great. And then one night, I decided I would bring in a trumpet. A trumpet is a three-piece instrument, looks like a little megaphone.
Like a real trumpet?
No.
No, just a
megaphone.
Oh, a megaphone.
Just a megaphone,
got it. Okay.
Three-piece megaphone. We stuck it in the center of the table, and Gertrude kept saying, the pastor kept saying, well, you know, you should put that in a bowl of water with salt in it. And I always say, why? And nobody could answer the why. And it wasn't until many years later that while reading a book, I realized the original trumpets had a wire form, but were made of felt. Felt does not conduct electricity. So therefore, by putting it in the water would soak up into the felt, and this would be useful for spirit to use.
Okay.
Well, we ended up with a glass of water and the trumpets here. And then it started this next week, it would come down into between our hands, and it would go just like an Indian drum, go into each other hand. There were 10 people at the table. When I got over to the other side to a lady that was there who hated this trumpet, it would rock in front of her and then fall right on her. And we kept on saying, Mabel, you got to start appreciating what you got here, okay?
Listen up.
And so at this point in time, I decided I need to get out of just this setting and go somewhere else and find out. So one summer day, I decided I would go to Lilydale. I had had a job on the Cape. The lumber came down, it was the wrong one. They wouldn't send it till again next week, and I didn't want to tear down everything. So I said, this is a good time to go to Lilydale out in New York State.
Oh, cool, wow.
Now, I had never been there. And I'd read all the books, including The Psychic Mafia, has you on camera and computer and stuff. And I said, you know, that's baloney. That's absolutely baloney. You can't do that. Okay. So I went out, I drove out, parked my truck outside the gate, and went in, paid my dues, and went up to the hotel, and I registered as John Sullivan from Boston. Well, if you look in the Boston book, there has to be umpteen Sullivans,
of course.
Okay, especially John's. So I figured I had a pretty good edge on this, because if they're following me, okay, they're going to find out who I am, each one of the Sullivans.
So you knew you were safe.
So I knew I was safe. So I went down to the cafeteria, and I just got something to eat for supper. And without saying anything other than this is what I'd like here and here, I didn't talk to anyone, so no one knows who I am. And then they had what they call an evening service, an all-message service. A medium gets up there and just starts giving messages to different people in the congregation. Well, the hall holds about 500 people.
Oh, boy.
That night, there was probably 35, 40 people down front. And I came in the back door and sat up near the back. I'm an observer, and that's all I wanted to do. The woman got through with the person she was talking to, and she said, "Sir, are you in the back?" She said, "Come down here." And I said, "Oh, really? You
Hide
know?"
no more.
Yeah. So she said, "You know, when you walked in the door, there was a gentleman who walked in with you. He tells me his name is Frank. He tells me he worked for the railroad, and he's dressed in the conductor's uniform. Do you know who that is?"
Oh, jeez.
I said, "Man, you know, here I am,
Yeah.
400 or 500 miles from home, and you got me dead nuts."
And he's still with you.
Yeah, and he's still with me. So that gave me some inspiration in the fact that no one could know.
Yeah, I hear you.
And here's what I've gotten
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
So now we start to do our continual observing and learning and growing. And back at the Brockton Church, I used to chair the services. And chairing the service is just like we do at our church. And we don't do the message work, we don't do the lecture, the guest of the day does that. And one day there were 6 of us on the platform to do the readings. And I was going to be the chairperson, I thought. And in the course of it all, the Reverend said, "You know, there's somebody here I've known for a while, and I know their work, and I know they do a good job." And I thought she was talking about one of the other people, till she called my name. She said, "Will you do 3 readings for me?" Oh. I'll tell you, I stood up there, and I must admit, if I could have dropped through the bottom of the floor and gone out, I would have done that. And it's amazing because I did 3 readings, sat down, and my legs were shaking so bad I thought I couldn't walk again for life.
You were receiving.
I was receiving it. And what was interesting, I'm concerned afterwards the validity of everything, okay?
Sure, sure.
We can't have 100% with everyone. That's not going to happen. But I went over to the people that I had spoken with, and I asked them how the message was. And everyone received it gracefully. And there was no questions. And so I said, you know, maybe there's more to this than I can imagine.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time, I was just, this nice church service, okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, that was fine. So I got involved in this particular way, one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I must say, it was a eye-opening of the fact that, and it's changing everything you know. Everything you were brought up to believe in.
Yeah.
It's gone out the window. You're done.
Yeah.
It's over, and the hand clapping's still waiting to be done. And you're saying to yourself, how could this happen, okay?
Why me?
Well, not only why me, but, you know, didn't I somewhere before I came to the earth plane decide to do this work and have decided in the meantime, I don't think I'll get involved. And all of a sudden you get a house, all the ways you shouldn't develop this, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now you're thrown right into the
Your mission
middle.
was given to you.
Yes, yes, you're on a mission.
Yeah.
And you never know what the mission is, because it'll just drive you crazy in the meantime.
Yeah.
I learned several other things with this. The healing was a very important part. And I think personally, the healing is the most important part of the service. Messages can come and go depending on what you do. If you were told, for instance, you know, when you go out here, if you take a right on the street and go down to the corner, you're going to have an accident, okay? And you decide, you know, I'm going around the block. I'm going to take a left and going around the block. You've changed the direction that people can see. Now, spirit can see clearly about 3 months. 3 months.
Okay.
So 1 to 3 months, it's pretty clear unless you change what your direction is.
Okay.
Once you change the direction.
All right. So you're hearing the thought. If it sounds negative or scary or whatever, you're rewriting it?
No.
No.
First of all, the one thing I did not want to do was interpret.
Okay.
The only time I interpret are symbols, okay? If there's a symbol of, for instance, if you see a flag, you're talking to somebody and there's a flag shown straight out in the air, it's a positive, it's a go, it's 100%.
Okay.
If you see it at half-mast and it's drooping, It's not quite there yet.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
If you see just the flagpole, you need to build on that, whatever the person wants, okay? So that would be an interpretation of a symbol.
Yeah.
And everybody can interpret them differently.
Sure.
There's no standard.
Yeah.
Just like colors. We can sit down and say to you, red is this, green is this, blue is this. And what I found was doing a service right after I was certified as a medium, I went to Quincy Church. And a couple of things happened that give you what I call the awakening. First of all, we're in the church, and it's a spiritual church.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I see all these Italian people. And I say, what's going on here, you know? And a lot of old ladies and stuff, and they're praying, they got the rosary. And I said, you know, this is very odd. So I said to the pastor, you know, I have a problem here. And I said, can you help me identify it? I see all these Italian people, and they're here in the church. He said, oh, yeah. He said, it used to be an Italian Baptist church.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So you see that, okay, what you may think may not be the reality of things.
Gotcha.
So you need to question, whether you question someone here or you question those above, you need to get an answer that's adequate for the situation.
Yeah.
So then we're doing the service. And in the part of the service, now, red to me means energy, means full blast. We're going ahead with all the gusto we can.
Yeah.
I don't see it as anger, okay? Some people say, oh, that's anger.
Yeah.
I don't see it as that.
Yeah.
And as I was giving a message to the lady, I saw red all around her. And I was about to say, I see a lot of energy, when I heard a voice say to me, just tell her what you see. So I said, ma'am, I says, I'm looking out there, and all around you is an aura of red. And I'm a little concerned of how to relate that to you. Oh, she said, I love red.
Oh.
My whole bedroom's red, the spread, the rug, the floor, and this. I said, man, I couldn't sleep there, you know? But this is somebody's interpretation.
Sure.
This to her was a calming.
Okay.
So we have to realize what's good for me is not good for you.
Right, right, right. Everyone brings themselves to the,
Everyone.
yeah,
It's you and what's with you.
yeah. How it clicks.
Yes. My healing color is blue. I can see blue around an individual. Now, where is the blue? What's the intensity of the blue? If it's around the head only, we know it's an emotional, mental issue. If it's around the body or a particular part of the body, we know that healing's needed in that particular area. Now, if you see it coming from it at a distance behind the person, the healing's coming to them because they need it, and they need to do some preparation to receive it.
Ah.
Preparation.
Preparation.
Very important thing. When I was up in Lilydale, I met this trumpet medium. He was one who would sit for his friends only. The first week I spent up there, I found out about him the second day. So every day I would go down to his house and I'd knock on his door. Hi, I'm John, I'm from the Brockton Church. Is there a chance I can sit with you? And she says, well, I only sit with my friends. I just want to be your friend. Okay?
How cute.
And every day I did this, and finally Saturday, the day before we left, he caught me at one of the services. He said, if you'd like to come down tonight, we would be glad to have a seance at my house. Now, seance. Seance is not a Hollywood seance.
Yeah.
Seance is nothing but a group of people sitting around getting information from the spirit side of life. But with him, there was this megaphone-looking unit, and it would levitate, come over to you, and talk to you one-on-one.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had the chance that night to talk to several people from the spirit side of life, which was interesting because one thing you keep in mind, everybody in the room hears everything. So it's not like, and let me tell you something, if you don't want everybody else to know your business, don't even think it, okay? And it was interesting, one night, couple of years later, we were sitting there, and I had a bunch of, I always carry a notebook, always have.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of questions to ask Spirit. And I forgot beforehand to review them.
Oh.
One of my guys comes in, he says, you have many questions. I said, I do. He says, ask them. And I'm saying, and he read them out of my book.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what I said. Man, oh man, you know, this is really, really interesting. You can see this, okay?
Yeah.
And gave me the answers that I needed. And that began some of the questioning of, okay, where are you in perspective to the God that we talk about?
Sure. Okay, good question.
He says, you know, we are on like level 3. You are on level 2. So there's one below it somewhere. And he said, if we haven't the answer that you need, we go to level 4. And so forth, they to the other, they to the other. And I said, so this bit where, you know, God sees every leaf that falls, every sparrow that drops. He said, that is from man, not from God.
Interesting.
So you start to see that there's a little complexity here that man has created that has nothing to do with the spiritual side of life.
Yeah.
When you say to yourself, where is God? God's not out there, up there, because they've been to the moon and everywhere else and never found God.
Yeah.
But they haven't looked in the most important part, and that's within each individual.
Sure.
Once you find that God force, you can exhibit that it works by your deeds and what you're doing.
Sure.
And I think that's where we miss a lot of things in life. I mean, I've watched these politicians, for instance, talk about, I'm Christian this, I'm Christian that.
Yeah.
Okay, big deal. Big deal.
Yeah.
Man made every single religion on earth, every single one.
Yep.
And consequently, you're following man's dogmas, creeds, whatever the case may be. So if we're going to do something, let's do it from within. Never mind telling us all about it. Because even if you want to quote the Bible for a moment, he talks about the Pharisees and the priests, rather, out there praying out loud in the public. And consequently, it's not the public you need to pray in. You need to go within the, as he said, the closet of your soul.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
And there you will find the interpretations and the needs met.
Yeah.
So this is how you unroll things. Now, I'm not saying everybody unrolls spirit that way, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe I needed a push. I'm not sure.
You took your time and you questioned and you were moved. You kept being moved to another question, another experience, another church. I mean, I could see your journey was perfect.
Well, you know, perfect is a man-made word.
Well,
the journey was there.
You were guided.
And I think one of the problems we find, we're all looking for the destination, but I think the journey along the way is the most important part of it.
Yeah.
And most people forget this. They don't even understand what their journey is. Many of the mediums who get their certifications, etc., want to hang the shingles out and do readings. I'm not a big fan of private readings.
Yeah.
You want to do a private reading with me, you come to Worthington. Okay?
Sure.
That cuts a lot of people right off, okay? Which is okay with me.
Sure.
Because I find most of the people who have come need a healing more than they need a reading.
Yeah.
And they don't know this yet. That's the problem and I have, okay?
Yeah.
And they need to find this out. I can remember one lady who came up, a lady friend of mine brought her up, and she said, and like I said, don't tell me anything about you, okay? I don't want to know. The less I know, the better, my mind's clear. And I'm sitting there giving her a healing, and all of a sudden I heard a lady say to me, you know, she needs the healing. She has what I died from. And I could feel a motherly lady around, and it's hard because with me, my grandmother raised me till I was 7, so when I say motherly, it could be my grandmother, okay, instead of my mother. So I have a motherly lady here. And there was also a gentleman who came in who was much older than she was, and he said to me, tell her that I still love her, and I'm here, describe me. So after the healing, I said to her, there's a gentleman here. And I explained what he looked like, etc. And I said, is this father? And she says, no, it was my boyfriend. He passed away just before we got married.
Oh.
And so I said, and your mother's here. And she was, very, very, very upset. And she didn't want to deal with her mother at all. So one thing led to another, and she says, what does she want? I said, she wants you to know she died from what you have. And she says, yes. She said, she died of breast cancer. I had breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so you see two things are happening here. You're seeing where Spirit is trying to identify with the one here what the problem is and that they're there for them.
Yeah.
As I worked with her, we went into our little seance downstairs. She came for a few weeks. It wasn't about the third week she was able to call her mother in. and break that hatred or whatever it was between them.
Yeah.
And we went on for about maybe a year. And she used to come up and visit me in the summertime. And this one particular time she came up and she said, I'd like you to do a healing today. And as I was placing my hand in her back, my hand would slide down her back, which you just don't do in a church setting, but it is in a home. And finally she said to me, what's the problem? And I said, I don't know, but I would get a chest x-ray if I were you. And she said, why? And I said, I see like a cavity there, and I don't know anything about this. Well, I have a doctor's appointment. She said, I will get a chest x-ray. And she went to the doctors and found out her cancer had spread to the chest, etc.
Yeah.
She came one more time, and we're sitting downstairs. I use red light for cancer. It's just something I can dwell on well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and she says to me, you're having trouble visualizing red. I had a red light on. How can you not see red? Okay, I couldn't visualize. It was just like you had a white light on.
Yeah.
And I had heard her mother speak, and she said, my mother came, didn't she? And she said, and once she came, you could see the red light.
Yeah.
And I said, I did.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, there was a call, and I always called her Terry, and there was an automated call, and it said, will you accept a collect call from Teresa? I said, Teresa who? And she said, I'm sorry, that's the wrong answer. Click.
Oh.
I put it on the calendar. Teresa died at that time.
Oh my gosh. You know, we only have, 1 minute?
Yes.
Quickly,
Yeah.
where do our friends watching this show find your church?
They find it in 465 Granby Road in Chicopee, Mass.
All right, what's it close to? How do you get there?
Oh,
I mean,
it's
is
right
it-
across the street from Knights of Columbus. It's
okay.
Right next door to
And
Harry's.
it's called Healing Hands of Light. They can look up your website.
That's correct.
They can find everything that you do.
Yep.
You have a calendar of events.
Yes. Healing Hands of Light, SPCH.com.
Aha. Well, that'll be pulled up for folks to see.
Yes,
But
yes.
you do a wonderful job, and you've got a beautiful group of folks that you work
thank
with,
you.
and
Thank
your
you.
church is
Appreciate that.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
I can still remember Bliss Street, but this is just amazing. And
Nice.
congratulations.
Nice and updated.
Updated, I know. Well, I'm really having fun catching up. It's been, 15 years or so, and
I would think so.
yeah, you got to come back and tell us more. But I can see from your story why, I asked that innocent question, why spiritualism? And you certainly were pulled along.
Whether I wanted to or not.
Exactly, your mission was given to you.
It was.
So thank you, my friends, for joining me on Awaken the Dream, and for John coming today. And we will talk to you again soon.